the poor attendance is disheartening, but still, because we had promised, we are going to start with the theory part of our training. Amputation was the first topic because it starts with A, so I thought we'll give it as the first topic. Commonly asked questions are: describe the principles of amputation, describe what is an ideal amputation stump, named amputations like Krukenberg, Pirogov, Symes. Recently, there was a question on Ertl myoplasty. So, we'll be discussing all this in the subsequent slides. By definition, uh, amputation is a process or procedure which removes a part through one or more bones, as opposed to disarticulation, which means removal of a joint. The goals of amputation is ablation of a diseased tissue, reconstruction, optimizing the patient function, and reducing the morbidity to produce a physiological end organ. Physiological end organ so that an amputation prosthetic stump could be fitted onto it. What are the etiological factors that lead to amputation? Are peripheral vascular disease, diabetes, trauma as per the mangled extremity scoring system, nerve injury, trophic ulcerations, useless limb, example brachial plexus injury untreated, tumors, congenital conditions, infection, acute gangrene, and chronic like failure to heal in a pyogenic infection or a carcinoma in chronic sinus or a tuberculosis, which is very rare nowadays, and burns. The principles of amputation: except peripheral vascular disease, tourniquet has to be used. Use a defined flap electively with the apex at the fish mouth of the fish mouth should be at the level of bony resection. Means you take a curved incision and the apex of that amputation, the flap should be at the level of bony resection. Use any available flap in trauma to preserve the length. That means use a flap or take a part from the skin of the amputated part, so that could be used as a skin graft. Tailor the flap at least as long as the diameter of the stump. The options of the flap could be equal anterior posterior, equal medial and lateral, long posterior. It is advisable in peripheral vascular disease. Muscle is divided almost 5 cm distal to the bony resection. Beveling or contouring may be required for good stump shape. Stabilization of the muscle mass is required for providing stump padding, preventing atrophy, counterbalancing the deformed forces, improve function, and prevent bursa formation. So these are the two methods which are commonly used, that is myoplasty, that involves suturing of flexors to the extensors, and myodesis, direct suture of muscle to the bone. We will discuss this in detail in the few slides after. Nerves are divided cleanly under general tension proximal to the bone ends and allowed to retract them. No advantage for any particular technique of division, that is slant cut or transverse cut, whatever, you can do it as you feel like. Large nerves, that is sciatic, are ligated due to large vessels which are contained around them. Large arteries and veins should be doubly ligated and hemostasis achieved prior to the closure. Avoid excessive periosteal stripping of the bone, because if you strip periosteum, there is chances of spur formation, which will be again painful with the prosthesis. Closure: do not close under tension, preferably use interrupted sutures, and drains are necessary. In children, preserve the length, and disarticulation is more advantageous as compared to amputation. So what is to be done until the wound heals? Soft dressing, wrapping of the stump vital, crutches when limb control is achieved, airbag at the wound healing, definitive prosthesis by 3 weeks when stump is stabilized. The optimum time for prosthetic fitting: immediate by help of pylon, prompt by 7 to 10 days when evidence of stump healing is present, early by 3 weeks after stump has healed, late after stump is fully matured and there is little chance of stump breakdown. How to prevent contracture? Prone lying, muscle setting exercises, avoid hanging over the bed and resting on crutch. What is an ideal amputation stump? Ideal length and shape: above knee 12 centimeters from the knee joint, 18 centimeters from the GT, below knee 15 centimeters from the knee joint, above elbow 20 centimeters from the acromion, below elbow 18 centimeters from the olecranon. This is length and shape. Bone ends well covered with muscles. There should not be any adherent incisional scars. Muscle with good muscle power, absence of neuroma, free from infection, full and free movements at the joint. There should not be any fixed deformity. Should be covered with durable vascular subcutaneous tissue and skin that can withstand the pressure in bed-bearing areas for avoiding friction at the area of prosthesis. So these are few. The new nomenclature is not above knee but transfemoral. Through the knee it is known as a gritty stalk disc articulation. Below knee is transtibial. Ankle it is known as ankle. Along the ankle it is a Symes. And these are the few named amputation. Lisfranc is from the tarsometatarsal. Chopart is mid-tarsal. Boyd is talectomy with calcaneum excision. Will come over here. So Chopart is through metatarsal. Symes is ankle disarticulation with retained heel pad. Pirogov is ankle disarticulation with calcaneum retained posteriorly. Hind quarter, entire lower limb and hemipelvis disarticulation. Fore quarter is entire upper limb with scapular disarticulation. These are the new names: transtibial, transfemoral, transradial for below elbow, and transhumeral for above elbow. The Pirogov calcaneum is osteotomized, rotated, and arthrodesed, performed with distal tibia and talus excision. So here is the representative picture. The calcaneum is cut. This part of the foot is gone. This is brought in contact with the tibia. Symes, it was described by Professor of Surgery James Syme. His amputation was described this in 1844 as an alternative to below knee amputation. Lister was his assistant. Lister, the antiseptic person, married the daughter of Symes. This is just for getting out of the boring lecture. Operative technique: skin incision from the tip of malleoli across the anterior angle of the ankle crease and vertically distally. Then a subperiosteal dissection of calcaneum is done. Distal tibia fibula is resected 5 mm from the joint. Plantar aponeurosis attached to the bone and skin flap. Boyd is talectomy with calcaneum arthrodesis distal to the tibia. Now Krukenberg's operation: separate radial and ulna distally. Radius and ulna act like pincer because they have a strong. Somebody is writing on this. Ravi Teja, please avoid it.
Ravi Teja, you are warned for last time.
The radius and ulna are pincer-like and capable of strong prehension, have excellent manipulative ability, especially useful for blind patients with bilateral below elbow amputation, but may be useful for other amputees also. So here the extensor carpi ulnaris, digiti minimi, all the ulnar side ones are on the stitched onto the ulna. The radial side muscles are stitched onto the radius. Then a fork-like structure is made. This was also known as Krukenberg operation. Is a surgical technique that converts a forearm stump into pincer. It was first described in 1971 by German army surgeon Hermann Krukenberg. It is useful today also in some cases, but considered controversial by some surgeons. Advantage is it preserves proprioception and stereognosis. Once the procedure is performed, it does not prelude the use of functional prosthesis. Now coming on to what is myodesis. Here the tendon or muscle is attached to the bone through pre-drilled hole. Need: inadequate technique resulting in weak retracted muscles of skin that cannot tolerate the necessary pressure will obviously compromise the stability of the stump. Applying the myodesis technique for distal muscle stabilization gives greater stability as it involves the direct suturing of muscle or tendon to the bone. It is not recommended for peripheral vascular disease or the ischemic limbs. Instead, the surgeon will prefer a myoplasty. The advantage of myodesis are: it effectively counterbalances the antagonist, provides good strength, prevents contracture. Additional advantages are stabilization of femur in adduction by adductor magnus when you stitch adductor magnus to the femur. Enhance hip flexion by the rectus femoris. Enhance hip extension by biceps femoris. Excuse me, muting my mobile. Yeah. Enhance hip extension by biceps femoris. All these three muscles being the muscles that cross the hip joint. The residual limb can be restored to a more balanced natural position in weight bearing. Myodesis keeps the femur centered in the muscle mass, facilitating the socket comfort. The contraindication, muscle to bone suture does not operatively handling of the tissue, and encircling suture can carry the cause of muscle constrictions. For these reasons, it is not recommended in below knee amputees in vascular diseases. Now coming on to myoplasty. Myoplasty is a surgical technique used to foster distal muscle stabilization. In this technique, muscle is sutured to muscle and then placed over the end of the bone before closing the wound. Since it is widely accepted that myodesis offers better stabilization, myoplasty is not used that often. However, for patients with poor vascular health, myoplasty is preferred technique. In myoplasty, opposing muscle groups are simply joined to each other by suturing through the myofascia and then with the investing fascia over the end of the bone. In severely dysvascular residual limb with marginal viability, myoplasty is preferable method but should be done with little closure tension. In either cases, tapering of the muscle mass avoids excessive bulk of the distal disc. Now, Janus Ertel in 1920 described this transtibial amputation where he made a osteoperiosteal flap to join the tibia and fibula. So this osteoperiosteal sleeve from the distal tibia is sutured to both the bones. He believed that the traditional transtibial amputation provided non-physiologic environment that was worsened by discordant motion of tibia and fibula, and this will lead to disarticulation. The bone bridging component remains the most recognizable aspect of Ertel technique, but the description of the procedure focuses on evaluation of soft tissue. Individual ligation of each component of neurovascular bundle is required to recreate a residual limb that is physiologically similar to the native limb. A meticulous is used in upper extremity where prosthetics a gluteal amputation is an amputation performed without closure of skin in an urgent setting. Here, all the tissues from skin to bone are cut without creating a flap. Typical indication include catastrophic trauma or uncontrollable infection, like in infected gangrene. So this finishes off. Gopakumar sir, do we start with questions or I start with the second topic?
I think we can 5-10 minutes we can spend for questions, sir.
Okay, sir.
Any questions?
Students,
questions from the juniors. I think those who are listening to, they can ask. Yeah.
Yes. Sir.
Yes. Somebody was asking question.
Sir, no one was asking question. I was just announcing them.
Then we will go to the next topic. Then
Okay,
we'll
Okay, I'll start with the second topic, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So next topic is more important for practicals also.
Jan, there is a question that biomechanical advantage of, just 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Biomechanical advantage of lengths of amputations, biomechanical advantage. In the chat box, you can see that question.
I have some problems, sir.
No problem. I will ask you the question. Question is that he is asking biomechanical advantage of lengths of amputation. So basically, the question is that why you keep some sort of length to fit the base of prosthesis. Yeah.
Basically, it is the myotendinous junction from where you have to exercise. If you keep more of the tendinous portion, the chances of getting that area avascular and necrosed is more as compared to am I correct, sir?
No, Jayan, the question is different. The question is why you keep this much of length. Suppose we are doing a below knee amputation.
Yeah.
Why we keep, suppose we tell like 1 inch for 1 feet, 1 foot of the height
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
why 5 foot rather, or why 5 inch, 6 inch or 7 inch? This is the biomechanics. Yeah.
Yeah, basically for proper prosthetic fitting and decreasing the ergonomics, that is energy expenditure when the patient is walking.
So basically, this is for the base fit for the ergonomics and basically so that with the least amount of muscle force you can walk properly.
Walk properly.
So that is the basic idea of doing these things. And now with the advantage of recent prosthetic things, anything can be adjusted because now the end of the process which have now been designed, it has really been changed the whole scenario. So it can be now be changed. But for your purpose, you must understand where should be the length of a below knee amputation stump, where should be the length of the mid thigh amputation stump. These are basically written all in theory, and you have to answer both in theory and practical.
Yeah.
Am I correct, sir? Sivananda sir, Gopa sir, I think Gopa sir might be the best man to answer.
I think suppose you think of a long enough, the energy expenditure is very high. That is why the ideal stump is there. Stump length should be it should be to a particular extent so that the patient will have
Yes.
biomechanical advantage. Suppose you have got a long stem up to the supracondylar area, and if you want to put a prosthesis, you can think of the socket, the length of the socket that is required to go higher up, isn't it? So that becomes a much more cumbersome.
So I think you have got the answer, and I will request that you once you read from the textbook, these are all been written over there. Understand where should
Okay, sir. Should I start the second?
yeah. And you can go ahead.
This thing, a topic, but because 80% of the students may get one case of non-union in their exam, still in theory, classification, etiology, pathology, management could be one of the short questions. So coming on to definition, a fracture is said to have gone on to non-union when normal biological healing process ceases to the extent that solid healing will not occur without further treatment intervention. US FDA definition defines a non-union as a fracture that is at least 9 months old and has not shown any signs of healing for 3 consecutive months. Muller's definition of non-union is failure of tibia fracture to unite after 8 months of non-operative treatment. So there is varied number of months, etc. in these definitions. So now it is said that non-union is defined as a fracture that in the opinion of treating physician has no possibility of healing without further intervention. And a delayed union is defined as a fracture that in the opinion of treating physician shows slower progress of healing than anticipated and is at risk of non-union if there is no further intervention added onto it. The etiology, mainly predisposing factors are instability, inadequate vascularity and poor contact. The most basic requirement of fracture healing are mechanical stability, adequate blood supply and bone-to-bone contact. In absence of one or more of these factors, the fracture to lead to development of non-union. The factors may be negatively affected by the severity of injury, the suboptimal fixation resulting from either poor plan or a good plan carried out poorly, or a combination of injury and suboptimal surgical fixation. So this is one of the charts which shows with what type of stabilization, what type of healing is obtained. If you give a cast close treatment, periosteal bridging callus and interfragmentary ossification is found. Compression plate gives primary contact healing. Intramedullary nail, early bridging periosteal callus and late is medullary callus. With external fixator, depending on the rigidity, if it is less rigid, you have a periosteal callus, and more rigid, there is a primary cortical healing. Inadequate immobilization with adequate blood supply will lead to hypertrophic non-union. Inadequate immobilization and without adequate blood supply, it would be a atrophic non-union. Inadequate reduction with displacement of fracture site will lead to oligotrophic non-union. So coming on to what is instability. Mechanical instability means excessive motion at the fracture site, which can follow internal or external fixation. Factors producing mechanical instability include inadequate fixation, distraction of the fractures, or poor bone quality. If an adequate blood supply exists, excessive motion at the fracture site results in abundant callus formation, widening of the fracture line, failure of the fibrocartilage to mineralize, and ultimately failure to unite, leading to a hypertrophic type of picture. Inadequate vascularity. The loss of blood supply can be because of severity of injury or because of surgical dissection. Open fractures, high energy, strip of the soft tissue, damage the periosteal blood supply, may disrupt the nutrial vessel, leading to impairment of the endosteal blood supply. Injury of certain vessels such as posterior tibial artery increase the risk of non-union. Vascularity may be compromised by excessive stripping of periosteum as well as damage to the bone and soft tissue during open reduction. Whatever is the cause, inadequate vascularity results in necrotic bone ends, and the necrotic bone surface inhibit fracture healing, resulting in non-union. Third is poor bone-to-bone contact. Poor bone-to-bone contact at the fracture site may result from soft tissue interposition, malposition of the fragments, bone loss, and distraction. Whatever the cause, poor bone-to-bone contact compromises stability and creates a defect. The probability of fracture union decreases as the defect increases. This is known as the critical defect. The larger the critical defect, that is the distance between the fracture surfaces, there would be less chances of union. The critical defect represents the distance between the fracture surfaces that will not be bridged by bone without intervention. The critical defects depends on variety of the injury related fractures. So a good contact surface area, this is a fair contact and this is poor. Similarly, this is bone contact. Even this will unite well, but this is a poor union situation. Horizontal, intermediate and vertical fracture lines and stability, this will give the most stable construct as compared to this one. Now, other contributing factors for non-union are infection, smoking, medications like phenytoin, phenobarbitones, advanced age, systemic medical condition, poor functional level, venous stasis, burns, irradiation, obesity, alcohol abuse, metabolic bone disease, malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies. Now coming on to examination. Generally, non-union that display little or no motion have some apparent mobility, or that is abnormal mobility, have some callus formation and good vascularity at the fracture site. These are hypertrophic. Non-union that display motion typically have poor callus formation, may be vascular like oligotrophic or avascular like atrophic, that is, there is a painless abmorph. Assessment of motion at non-union site is difficult in limb with paired bones like radius ulna, tibia, fibula, where one of the bone remains intact. There you have to do a rotational abmorph. You have to see for telescopy and transmitted movement of the fragments. You have to check for the bony irregularity. A neurovascular examination should be performed to document vascular insufficiency and motor or sensory dysfunction. Active and passive motion of the joint adjacent to the non-union, both proximal and distal, should be performed. Not uncommonly, motion at the non-union site diminishes motion at the adjacent joint. Now, radiographically, ideally, it is a AP and lateral radiograph, including both proximal and distal joint. But two oblique views of non-union site on a small cassette will improve magnification and resolution. A review of original fracture film, that is before the non-union, the first treatment film, gives the character and severity of initial bone injury. They can also show the progress or lack of progress towards healing. Subsequent radiograph of the salient aspects of the previous treatment will tell the story of the non-union. The prior plain film should be examined for loose implant, broken implant, inadequacy in size of number of implant. That is, for humerus, if you are applying a 6-hole plate or a 5-hole plate, it is inadequate. Definitely that fracture is going to go into a non-union. Also, you have to see for inclusion of removal or insertion of nail on subsequent films. Evolution of deformity at the non-union site, whether gradual process or a single event, should be evaluated via prior radiograph. Diphyseal non-unions involve primarily cortical bones, whereas metaphyseal and epiphyseal non-unions involve cancellous bones. The presence of intra-articular extension here is to be evaluated. Healing effort of the bone. The radiographic healing effort of bone quality defines the biological mechanical etiology. Assessment of healing includes radiolucent lines, gaps, and callus formation. The assessment of bone quality includes observing sclerosis, atrophy, osteopenia, and bone defects. These are the common viva questions also when you are shown an X-ray of a non-union case and the examiner asks you what all things are you observing in this. So you have to say about the sclerosis, osteopenia, bone defect, radiolucent line, gaps, callus present, absent, that way. Radiolucent line seen along fracture surface suggests lesions that are devoid of bony healing. Callus formation occurs in fracture and non-union with an adequate blood supply. Again, it is being repeated. Now, classification. Weber and Scheck classified non-unions based on radiographic healing effort and bone quality as viable non-union. Viable non-union include hypertrophic and oligotrophic. Hypertrophic non-union possess adequate vascularity, display callus formation. They result from they arise as the result of mechanical inadequate mechanical stability with persistent motion at the fracture site. The fracture site is progressively resorbed with accumulation of unmineralized fibrocartilage and display progressive widening radiolucent line with sclerotic edges. The reason that persistent motion inhibits calcification of fibrocartilage remains unclear. Capillaries and blood vessels invade from both the sides of non-union but do not penetrate the fibrocartilage. Since motion persists at the non-union site, endosteal callus may accumulate and seal the medullary canal, increasing the production of hypertrophic periosteal callus. So if there is a question on pathology of non-union, this part is very important to be written over there. Hypertrophic non-union can be classified as elephant foot type with abundant callus or a horse hoof type which are still hypertrophic with less abundant callus. Oligotrophic non-union arise from displacement of the fractures. Non-viable do not display callus and are incapable of bone union. Their inadequate vascularity precludes the formation of periosteal callus. The radiolucent gap observable on plain radiograph is bridged by fibrous tissue that has no osteogenic capacity. An atrophic non-union is most advanced type of non-viable non-union. Classically, the ends of the bone surface have been thought to be avascular, although a recent study has questioned this conventional idea. Radiographically, the fracture surface appear partially absorbed and osteopenic. Severe cases may show large sclerotic avascular bone segment or bone loss. Now coming on to role of CT scan. CT scan can be used to estimate the percentage of cross-section area that shows bridging. Non-union shows bridging less than 5% of the cross-sectional area. Healed or healing fractures shows up to 25% of cross consolidation. CT scans are useful in assessing intra-articular non-union for step-off and joint incongruency. They are useful method for estimating cross-sectional area of healing. In cases of infected mid-shaft tibia non-union, CT scanning is useful method for estimating progression of cross-sectional area of healing over time. Rotational deformities may be accurately quantified by using CT scan, comparing it to the relative orientation of proximal and distal segment of involved bones. Now coming on to bone scans. Technetium 99 pyrophosphate complex reflects increased blood flow metabolism and are absorbed onto hydroxyapatite crystals in area of trauma, infection and neoplasia. The bone scan will show increased uptake in viable non-unions because there is a good vascular supply and osteoblastic activity. Radio-labeled white blood cells, that is indium 111 or technetium 99 or hexamethyl propylene amine oxime HMPAO are used for evaluating acute bone infections, and gallium scan is for chronic bone infection. Gallium 67 citrate localizes the site of chronic inflammation. So if a question comes on bone scan, this much written would be sufficient for getting good marks. Now coming on to the other laboratory studies, ESR and C-reactive proteins are useful in regard to the course of infection. They don't say the presence of infection, but the progress of treatment or disease is known by ESR getting gradually or in repeated investigations. Increase in ESR and CRP is important. Another important thing is albumin level and transferrin level. If wound healing potential is in question, like in infected non-unions, an albumin level and a total lymphocyte count has to be of 3 grams per deciliter and more than 1500 cells preferably. If patient has a history of multiple blood transfusion, hepatitis panel, HIV is important. When infection is suspected, non-union site may be aspirated or biopsied. The aspirated or biopsy material is sent for a cell count and gram staining. Cultures are done for anaerobic, aerobic, fungal, all these things. And this should be done before, after 2 weeks of no antibiotic period. Now, this is a chart in short by which you can remember hypertrophic does not display gross motion, pain elicited on manual stressing. Abnormal radiolucent line is seen at the site, increase uptake on the scan, and oligotrophic, that way we have discussed all these. Now coming on to infected non-unions, depending on specific nature of infection, they can be active draining, active non-draining or a quiescent infection. They show osteolysis, osteopenia, sclerotic, avascular bone segment and bone loss. There is increased uptake of technetium bone scan, increased uptake on indium scan for acute infection, that is acute on chronic if it is, or increased uptake on gallium scan for chronic. Elevated ESR and CRP, white blood count may be elevated. Blood culture should be obtained in febrile patient. Aspiration of fluid from non-union site may be useful. Active non-draining is no drainage, but the area is warm, erythematous and painful, and quiescent, there is no drainage or local sign or symptom of infection. Coming on to treatment. The objective of treatment is directed at healing the fracture. This is not only the objective, since a non-functional infected deformed limb with pain, stiffness of joint will be unsatisfactory outcome. So emphasis is placed on returning the extremity and the patient to the fullest functional possible after the treatment. AO concept of non-union treatment is stable fixation, decortication, bone grafting, leaving the non-union tissue undisturbed for hypertrophic non-unions and early return to function. Coming on to treatment of hypertrophic non-unions, provide mechanical stability. This causes increase in chondrocyte-mediated mineralization of fibrocartilage. They require no bone grafting. Non-union site should not be resected. The method of rigid stabilization involves exposing the non-union site, like in compression plating. Decortication of non-union site may accelerate the consolidation of the bone. If the method of rigid stabilization does not involve exposure, like intramedullary nailing, surgical dissection to prepare the non-union site is unnecessary. In oligotrophic, what we need is bony contact, bone grafting to stimulate local biology or combination of two. Reduction of bone fragments to improve the bone contact can be performed with internal and external fixation. Reduction is appropriate for oligotrophic non-union with large surface area contact. Bone grafting is appropriate that have poor surface characteristic and no callus formation. Atrophic non-union, there is no non-viable non-union. Blood supply is poor. Primary problem is biological. Atrophic non-union require treatment strategy that require both biology as well as mechanics. Biological stimulation by autogenous cancellous bone graft laid on widely decorticated area of the non-union site. Small free necrotic fragments are excised, resulting in defect, which is bridged with again bone graft. Mechanical stability is achieved by internal or external fixation. When stabilized and stimulated, an atrophic non-union revascularizes, but slowly over the period of several months. This has to be visualized radiographically by observing the progression of osteopenia. So mechanical method of treatment: weight bearing, external supporting device, dynamization in intermedullary nailing, excision of bone lattice fibula and paired bones, screw applications and cable and wire application. Biological methods: non-structural bone graft, decortication, electromagnetic stimulation, ultrasound and shockwave stimulation that are both mechanical and biological. We have structural bone grafting, exchange nailing, synostosis technique, Ilizarov, arthroplasty and arthrodesis. Coming on to infected non-union, it is often further complicated by incapacitating pain because of and often with narcotic dependency. There is soft tissue problem and deformity, joint problem in form of contractures, limited range of movement, motor and sensory dysfunction, osteopenia, poor general health, depression, etc., etc. The priority of treatment is heal the bone, eradicate infection, correct the deformity, and maximize the joint motion and muscle strength. The goal is to achieve solid bone union, again the same point which I have discussed previously. So if there is a purulent draining infection, non-union takes longer and more difficult to heal. An actively draining infection requires serial debridement. In the first debridement, obtain deep culture specimen including soft tissue and that of the bone. No perioperative antibiotic to be given 2 weeks prior for getting exact bacterial organism in the culture. All necrotic soft tissues, necrotic bone and foreign bodies should be excised. Sinus tract should be sent for pathological study to rule out carcinoma. Commonest carcinoma is the squamous cell or a basal cell. Pulsatile irrigation with antibiotic solution is effective. A dead space. Nowadays, dead space filling either could be with the help of vac dressing. Previously, it was gentamicin cement beads or by a masculate technique, that is putting a dead space filling with a antibiotic impregnated bone cement plug, removing it, and the dead space is filled with morcellized bone graft. Currently, the most utilized method of filling the dead space is rotational vascularized muscle. Following debridement can be reconstructed using bone grafting techniques. We will discuss them later. Active non-draining. That is, there is erythema, there is swelling, there is tenderness, but no pus is coming out. The history often includes episodes of fever. Treatment principles are similar to that of actively draining, that is debridement, culture, soft tissue management, stabilization, stimulation of bone healing, and systemic antibiotic therapy. These cases typically require IND of an abscess and excision of only small amount of bone and soft tissue. Non-draining infected non-union can be managed with primary closure, where infection. Non-draining quiescent infected non-union occur in patient with history of infection but without drainage of symptoms for 3 or more months, or without a history of infection but with a positive scan. These cases are treated like atrophic non-unions with plate and screw stabilization. The bone is decorticated and stabilized. Bone graft may also be performed. If external fixation is used, the infection in non-union may be treated with compression without open debridement or bone grafting. Now coming on to synostosis, two commonly asked questions in exam. One is what is a Huntington's procedure, that is the tibialization of fibula, and other is a Harmon procedure, that is a posterolateral bone grafting. These are various methods of doing synostosis, that is fusing tibia with fibula by this thing in this Harman's procedure, superior tibiofibular joint is fused, sort of arthrodisc, and if there is a poor anterior skin or soft tissue, then you go for a posterolateral bone grafting like in a Harman procedure. So this is one slide which I got from net. 10 commandments of non-union treatment. Examine the patient carefully, consider all available informations, learn about personality of non-union, not repeat failed prior procedures, base thy treatment plan on non-union type and treatment modifiers and not on false prophecies. Forsake the use of same hammer for every single nail. That is, the treatment of non-union requires surgical expertise in a wide variety of internal and external fixation techniques. Honor the soft tissue and keep them whole. Preferably, take a single flap up to the bone. Don't dissect skin, then soft tissue and though. Take a thick flap, preferably every time. Consider minimally invasive techniques like Elizero bone marrow injections when extensive surgical exposures have failed. Not take the previous treating physician's name or treatment method or results in vain, particularly in presence of the patient. Honor the referring physician and keep him or her informed of the patient's progress. Burn no bridges. That is, leave thyself the option of next treatment plan. Covet stability, vascularity, and bone-to-bone contact, which was the main cause of non-union. So, this is again repeat of what I have told just now. Thank you. I'm finishing off with this.
Any question from the juniors? I think they are not been asking any question.
Too exhaustive.
Yeah.
I think, sir, we should finish our lectures first. No student is asking any question.
Okay. Charney Mother present infected non-union. There is a question from Dr. Saurabh. Can we use the Charney matter classification for non-union?
So that is mainly for this thing, osteomyelitis.
Yes, that is a different one. It is not for non-union at all. It is not a non. It is for the osteomyelitis. There are 4 types. You know, I think that is a base written in the Campbell. You read that. It is not. It is not nowhere related with the non-union.
This talk on bone bank is taken from the book of Natarajan sir. It is a 72-page book which I've read to make this presentation in short, some 20 slides. So, sorry. So previously this was called as homograft. The allografting technique taken from cadaver was called, or like you take out a prosthetic head, using it in other patient was called as homograft, but nowadays it is known as a allograft. It may be orthotopic, heterotopic, or ectopic. Orthotopic means if the proximal femur is substituted by a patient's donor's proximal femur, it is a orthotopic. Heterotopic means any bone, that is fibula, is used in spine that way, or ectopic is from facial attack and used as a tendon graft. So syngenesioplastic graft, allograft taken from immediate relative like father, mother, sister, or brother. So allograft act as scaffold for ingrowth and referred to as osteoconduction. The stages of graft incorporation include revascularization, graft resorption, creeping substitution, new osteon laid over the allograft, and graft remodeling. Classification. Allografts can be classified on basis of graft anatomy, method of procedure, processing and sterilization as cortical, cancellous, osteochondral or soft tissue allograft. And on basis of processing, there can be fresh frozen, freeze-dried and demineralized bone matrix. So the organization of bone bank involves a director, an officer in charge, research fellow, technician and lab assistant. The advisory board has a dean, orthopedic HOD, microbiology, pathology HOD, forensic HOD, and anesthesia HOD. The goal of bone bank is to preserve the physical integrity of implant, reduce immunogenicity, and ensure sterility. The things which are required in a bone bank include a autoclave, a surgical kit, a drying cabinet, deep freezer, water bath for pasteurization, band saw used for bone cutting, freezed dryer used for removing the moisture, laminar airflow hood for creating a sterile field for packing, sealing machine for packing the tissues, computer and printer used for record keeping, gamma chambers, fridge, uninterrupted 5 kVA power supply with backup, miscellaneous equipment accessories, glass and plasticware, polyethylene, craft paper bags, and chemical reagents. So donor evaluation for a living donor, elderly patient with fractured neck femur undergoing hemiarthroplasty, elderly patient OA hip going for THR, elderly patient OA knee undergoing TKR, bone segments from corrective osteotomies and vascular ischemia. The cadaveric donors, all bones from cadaver can be used if all donor criteria are met. Donation and donor evaluation, consent, donor selection and donor coordination and evaluation. So what are things to be checked? Medical and social history, infection, malignancy, HIV, hepatitis risk behaviors have to be checked. Physical examination, drug abuse and jaundice has to be checked. Blood test for Rh factor, anti-HIV, HV2, all this, and autopsy result is performed. Medical history, exclusion from bone allograft donation, presence of infection, presence of malignant disease, degenerative neurological disease, pituitary-derived growth hormone use, connective tissue disorders, high-dose corticosteroid use, significant exposure to toxic substance, irradiation, and HIV hepatitis. Donor age group 15 to 50 years for long bones and femoral head of any age. Contraindication, presence of infection, presence of malignant disease, degenerative neurological disease, pituitary, use of growth hormone, all those things become contraindication. Now, tests for tissue harvesting are culture, histopathology, and radiology. The procurement should follow class 1 sterile room by FDA principles, laid down principles. The place may be sterile operating room or a clean sterile room at the bone bank. Time of procurement, ideal time within 12 hours if the cadavers are stored in the room temperature, or 24 hours if cadaver is stored in temperature of 4 to 8 degrees. Living donor procurement is done by routine surgical procedure. Femoral head or received blood bone segment is flushed with normal saline. Remove all the blood and fat globules. Samples are taken for smear, culture, histopathology, biopsy, and curettage. The tissue is soaked in normal saline with antibiotic and kidney tape for a tray for 10 to 15 minutes. Then the tissue is packed with sterile double jar technique and labeling is done and the jar is placed in freezer. For cadaver, it is usually done as a part of multi-organ tissue procurement, including heart, liver, kidney, cornea, and bone, in the same sequence that has to be taken out. The process is coordinated by transplant coordinator by taking consent and all necessary screen tests mentioned above. All the potential donor with sudden but known cause of death are approached. Only 1/5 of potential donor donate the bone. Consent form should include the limb from which the bone and ligament has to be harvested. Procurement team should contain 2 orthopedic surgeons. Bones from 2 limbs can be harvested by 2 teams. Transplant coordinator informs tissue bank manager, who in turn alerts the team. If the donors are not in the same hospital, then the ambulance equipped with major orthopedic instruments is used. Time is crucial factor in multi-organ retrieval. The order of retrieval is kidneys, liver, cornea, and last is the bone. The team should ideally take maximum of 2 hours to complete the whole procedure. If the limb are procured, 2 teams should work simultaneously. Packaging, sterile, this thing is used. Fragment is washed with saline and specimen taken from segment of for culture histopathology soaked in 2 liters of saline. Everywhere you find 2 liters, 2 hours, 2 teams, 2 bones. And normal saline with antibiotic solution for 20 minutes. Smaller grafts like femoral head, patella, calcaneal bone and soft tissues are packed in sterile double jar technique. Large grafts are packed by sterile triple jar technique using inner polythene, middle linen and outer polythene wrap. Reconstruction of cadaver is most important to determine the long-term success of bone banking. Cadavers should be treated with great respect. Limbs should be made to look as normal as possible by using a plastic tibia or femur. Effort should be made to do this great job of reconstruction. The collected graft storage, specimen and donor form are immediately transported to the bank and stored in quarantine freezer till the investigation results are obtained. 2 types of freezers are required, quarantine and definite freezers. Freezer should have separate compartment from each type of allograft. Now, method of sterilization, physical, either thermal, hot air or pasteurization, or steam autoclaving, non-thermal, radiation and gamma electron. Chemical, using ethylene oxide or formaldehyde. Pasteurization is the process of disinfecting tissue or bones by heating. In this process, mild temperature of 63 degree to 66 degrees is used for 30 minutes to kill the microorganisms. This is usually not recommended for sterilization of tissues because microorganisms are not completely inactivated. Autoclaving, bacteria are readily killed by moist heat than dry heat. Steam kills the bacteria by denaturing the protein. 121 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 minutes is the best method. Autoclaving is not recommended by American Association of Tissue Banking because it alters the structure of protein and bone strength. The chemicals that are used are ethylene oxide, formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, chlorobromo compounds, beta-propionolactane. Most widely used is ethylene oxide, but nowadays it is not used because of the increased risk of carcinogenicity. Ethylene oxide is applied in gaseous state in mixture with inert diluent like carbon dioxide and freon. After sterilization, the residual ethylene oxide is removed by flushing inert gas. Gamma radiation, 20 kilo gray to 40 kilo gray radiation is needed. 40 kilo gray is needed to inactivate HIV virus. American Association of Tissue Banking says dose of sterilization to 25 kilo gray. WHO Bangkok Biomaterial Research Center advised combination of pasteurization and radiation to eliminate HIV virus with pasteurization at 56 degree and gamma radiation again 25 kilo. Gamma radiation sterilization is used in more than 90% of tissue banks nowadays throughout the world. So this is how different types of bone grafts allografts are taken. This is the head, this is morcellized graft, and this is of different shape, the ribs, the femur and tibia and fibula. So allografts are processed either as a fresh allograft, fresh frozen allograft, freeze-dried allograft, demineralized bone allograft, cryopreserved and physically treated. So fresh frozen, the type of graft is used in young patients with osteochondral defects. The chondrocyte survival varies from transplantation and is universally related to time from retrieval. The ideal time is 1 to 2 hours. The dissected tissue is stored in Hartmann solution. I'll tell you the details of that. Different type of cryopreservatives like glycerol, dimethyl sulfoxide have been used. The time of procurement and usage is very short and insufficient for complete donor testing. This method is very rarely used nowadays and not followed anywhere in the world except in some research centers. So this is the composition of a Hartmann solution containing sodium chloride, potassium chloride, calcium chloride, sodium lactate and water. When fresh frozen in this method, the graft is slowly processed in two steps. First, to 20 degrees Celsius for 8 hours, followed by freezing to minus 80 degrees in order to stop all enzymatic activities. Allograft can be preserved up to 5 years by deep freezing. Advantage: long bones such as femur and tibia are stored. Storage up to 3 months reduces the immunogenicity, so the chance of graft resorption is very rare. Stored bone has got superior strength than other methods. Disadvantage: high cost of purchasing, operating and maintaining a freezer. The next is cryopreserved allograft. The lower the temperature, greater is the reduction of molecular activity. At minus 160 degrees, essentially all molecular action is stopped and tissue can be stored indefinitely. By cryopreservation, allograft can be stored for life. Most of the bone banks in the world don't prefer cryopreservation because it is costly. Now coming on to freeze drying or lyophilization, in which frozen bone is dehydrated by sublimation. Tissue moisture passes directly from the solid phase then it is converted to ice on condenser of freeze nitrogen. A vacuum is maintained in freezer, ensuring the bottle of bone allograft are sealed in sterile manner. The process allows tissue to be maintained at room temperature for 5 years. Freeze drying keeps the room temperature, so it is easy and to maintain, reduces antigenicity. Transfer of disease is rare. Disadvantage: decreased torsional strength, so it cannot be used for reconstituting a bone defect. Not a suitable technique of preserving long bone also. It should be reconstituted by immersing in normal saline. And demineralized bone, autolyzed, antigen extracted allogenic bone grafts are kept like this, that is AAA bones. Now physical preservation is by radiation. 3 megarads are known to weaken the bone matrix. There appears to be significant drop of breaking strength of bone. The effect is magnified when radiation is combined with freeze drying. Autoclaving produces Haversian canal coagulation and denaturation. Chemical processing may present significant problem like carcinogenicity. So you prefer a radiation, that is 25 kilo gray. Radiation is the best way of preserving these grafts. Now soft tissue, available soft tissue allografts are patellar tendon, Achilles tendon, fasciolata, ACL, peroneal tendon, anterior and posterior tibialis tendon, flexor tendons are used in ACL, PCL reconstructions, which Samantha sir will tell us in detail. So this was the third part of bone banking. I think so this was more of theory, but usually a question is asked.
No, bone bank though, I think there the theory question can also be nowadays it's coming now. Even it is asking the Viva also how to procure the bone and how it should be preserved. What are the basic tests? What are it has been all been documented, the serial test. What are the basic tests you have to do before taking the bone bank, and what are the steps of doing your allografts? I think these are every PG student they must know.
I'll just take 1 minute, sir.
Yeah. Gopal.
Yes, sir.
Yes, there is Karoji discussed given in the textbook that this bone is supposed to be unite by this much of time. Suppose you consider for a mid-shaft tibia fracture, okay. So basic time frame from in any young adult, the mid-shaft tibia fracture should unite by 12 to 16 weeks of time, okay. Then now the question is that when you answer, it has to be like it is properly treated. It is not like the half-heartedly treated or it's not been treated by the improper technique, okay. So it is all been given for the specific bone. It has got specific time to unite. Then another question, is there any role of procalcitonin level in infected non-union? Yes, In acute setting, there is a role of procal in acute setting. But if you find that suppose there is gross sort of infection, and then if you find that there is a redness and all the acute signals are there, then there is a role of procal. But if it is a chronic infected non-union or CAP non-union, I think there is no role of doing a procal unnecessary for that patient. Okay. Agreed, Dr. Jayant?
Yes, sir. But basically, I want to tell the students these topics which I am presenting now, these are on how you have to appear in theory. These are the basics that have to be there. Basic minimum that is to be there in the answer.
Yeah.
We are concentrating more on theory part.
So I think
So-
both questions are answered, and
Should I move on to the last one, that is bone graft substitutes, or
yeah. Move
it's
on to
enough
that.
for the day?
Yeah. I think bone graft will be the last one.
Okay, that is the last one, otherwise also, sir. So bone graft function, they provide structural support of articular fracture. I think so. I have not shared the screen.
Sir, please share your screen.
Yeah, I think so. I've done some mistake. Share screen. Yeah. So they provide structural support for articular fractures like in tibia plateau, prevent the post-op collapse. They act as a void filler to prevent fracture after cyst excision, improve healing of a fracture for non-unions. The mechanism of bone growth is either by osteoconduction, that is, they provide matrix for bone growth, or osteoinduction. Growth factors encourage mesenchymal cell to differentiate into osteoblast, and osteogenesis, that is, transplanted osteoblast and periosteal cell produce bone. The types of bone graft, autograft, allograft, we have discussed. Bone graft substitutes, they mainly have osteoconductive properties and osteoinductive agents like BMP2 and 7. Autogenous bone graft are gold standard. Gold standard means standard by which other materials are judged. They provide all three: conduction, induction, and osteogenesis. Drawback is limited supply and there is donor site morbidity. Autogenous bone graft can be cortical, cancellous, free vascular transfer, and bone marrow aspirates. Cancellous bone graft provide three-dimensional scaffold by that is osteoconductivity, osteocyte and stem cell, that is osteogenicity, a small quantity of growth factors, osteoinductive purpose. Little initial structural support, but can gain support as the bone is formed. Cortical bone graft, less biologically active than cancellous, less porous, less surface area, less cellular matrix, but have prolonged time of revascularization also. They provide structural support. Vascularized cortical bones are better structural support due to earlier incorporation. Also osteogenic and osteoinductive. Vascularized cortical graft, can anybody give me an example? A vascularized fibula used for AV and hip. Now bone marrow aspirates, these are osteogenic mesenchymal stem cells, that is the osteoprogenitor cells, exist in 1:50,000 ratio to nucleated cells in marrow aspirates. Number decreases with age, can be used in combination with a osteoconductive matrix. Autograft harvest, cancellous from the iliac crest, anterior taken from gluteus maximus medius pillar, and posterior taken from the posterior ilium near the sacroiliac joint. 1 inch lateral to the sacroiliac joint. Metaphyseal bone may offer local surface of graft harvest. Trochanter, distal femur, proximal and distal tibia, calcaneum, olecranon, distal radius and proximal area. Humerus are the common areas for metaphyseal bones. Technique, cortical window is made with osteotome. Can be done with a refining instrument. Circular drill for dowel harvest. That means a small, long sliver type of bone grafts if you need. Commercially available trifines or harvesters can be used percutaneously also. Cortically, fibula common donor, avoid distal fibula to protect ankle function. Preserve head to keep lateral collateral ligament, hamstrings should be left intact. cortical and tricortical pieces can also be obtained from the iliac crest. Bone allografts, cancellous or cortical, plentiful supply, limited infection rate, provide osteoconductive scaffold, may provide structural support. Available in fresh, frozen, and freeze dried. We have read about these. I'm skipping these slides. So in short, the fresh have high antigenicity, limited time to test for immunogenicity, use limited to joint replacement using shape matched osteochondral allografts. Fresh frozen, less antigen. You have time to test for disease, strictly regulated by FDA, preserve biomechanical properties. Freeze dried, even less antigenic, can be stored at room temperature up to 5 years. Mechanical properties degrade over the age. Then stages of incorporation of graft is revascularization, graft resorption, creeping substitution, and graft remodeling. So there is a stage of hematoma formation, which releases cytokines and growth factor. Then there is development of fibrovascular tissue. Then there is extension of Haversian system by the vascular growth. Then focal osteoclastic activity causes resorption of the graft and intramembranous or endochondral bone formation on graft surface. These are a few pictures how cancellous bone interfaces bone graft and host bone. And here this is the allograft next to the cortical host. This is the host bone, this is the allograft, and it remains so even after 4 years. Now coming on to the important part, commonly asked question, bone graft substitute. Need for bone graft alternative has led to development of graft substitutes. Avoid morbidity of autogenous bone graft harvesting. Provides mechanical properties. Most of the osteoconductive properties and inductive properties are also there. So they are used as extenders, enhancers, or substitutors. Extend large defects, multiple level spine fusions. Enhance autogenous bone graft success, and to replace the autogenous bone graft, they are used as substitutors. So allograft base used alone or in combination with other materials. Common example is allogrow or orthoblast. Factor based, natural or recombinant growth factors like TGF beta, PGDF, FGF, and BMP, and cell based used to generate new tissue alone or seeded onto a support matrix, that is mesenchymal stem cells. Ceramic based include calcium phosphate, sulfate, and bioglass, and polymer based, both degradable and non-degradable polymers like Cortos. Allograft based bone graft substitute. The use of allograft for bone repair often requires sterilization and deactivation of protein contained in extracellular matrix of the bone tissue and full cocktail of bone growth factors, protein, other biomaterial necessary for induction, and ultimately give bone healing. The desired factors and proteins are removed from the mineralized tissue by using demineralizing agent like hydrochloric acid. The mineral content of bone is degraded and the osteoinductive agents remain in the DBM. The DBM has been incorporated in several products currently in the market with calcium sulfate. It is known as Allomatrix DBM. This paste can be formed into an onlay or injected directly in the defect site. Dynagraft is DBM mixed with temperature sensitive polymer. Orthoblast is DBM mixed with same polymer and cancellous bone chips. So in this slide we saw polymers plus allograft combination is nowadays used very commonly. Collagen based matrices, highly purified type 1 dermal fibrillar collagen bone marrow is added to provide bone forming cells. Examples are Collagraft from Zimmer or Helios from DePuy. Then there is a DBM, demineralized bone matrix by HCl. We are treating the bone, you get this. Prepared from cadaveric human bone, acid extracted, leaving collagen, non-collagenous protein, and bone growth factors. Sterilized, which may decrease the availability of BMP. Either it could be in form of putty or in form of a paste. So growth factors activity varies. While they may offer some osteoinductive properties because of available growth factors, they mainly act as osteoconductive agents. So DBM available from multiple vendors in form of gel, putty or strips. Then bone graft substitutes like phosphate, sulfate of calcium, collagen-based this hydroxyapatite tricalcium phosphate. Resorption rates vary and also depend on porosity and geometry of the crystals or the substitutes that we get. The resorption of calcium sulfate is very fast. Hydroxyapatite is very, very slow. Over the period of 4-5 years, you can have those crystals present in the X-ray. Some products may be combined to optimize the resorption rate. The mechanical property also varies depending on the composition. Calcium phosphate has high compressive strength. Cancellous bone compressive strength is relatively low. Many substitutes have compressive strength similar to the cancellous bone. All designs can be used for with the internal fixation. And ceramic based bone graft substitutes, approximately 60% of bone graft substitute currently available involve ceramics. These include calcium sulfate, bioactive glass and phosphate. The use of ceramics, especially phosphate, is driven in part because of the fact that primary inorganic component of bone is hydroxyapatite, a subset of calcium phosphate. In addition, calcium phosphate are osteoconductive, integrative, and in some cases inductive also. They often require high temperature for scaffold formation and have brittle properties. Therefore, they are frequently combined with materials to form a composite like demineralized bone matrix. Calcium sulfate, also known as POP, is a biocompatible, bioactive, resorbable after 30 to 60 days. Significant loss of its mechanical properties occurs upon its degradation. Therefore, it is questionable choice for load bearing. Allomatrix or osteoset is combined with DBM, forms a putty or an injectable paste of calcium sulfate. Calcium phosphate, this is an example injectable paste of calcium phosphate. Commonly available from Synthes is Norian and Alpha BSM from Depew. This is a void filler. Then calcium phosphate injectable, very high compressive strength when it hardens. Some studies of its uses have allowed earlier weight bearing with this. So normally calcium phosphate is sometimes used in vertebroplasty also. Calcium phosphate accounts for the most of the ceramic based bone grafts. Several types of calcium phosphate including tricalcium phosphate, hydroxyapatite, coralline hydroxyapatite are available in paste, putties and matrices. Pro-osteon is a unique product obtained from sea corals. The advantage of this material is that the structure of coral is similar to that of the trabecular bone. However, many of the solid calcium phosphate pro-osteon is brittle and not suitable for load-bearing bones. Calcium sulfate is osteoconductive void filler. Rapidly resorbs, may be used as autogenous graft extender, commonly used with antibiotic in our settings where we fill it with bone grafts along with this. So these are the pallets that we are using normally in our situation, or we can use them in form of bead kits or injections. Bioactive glass, it is a biologically active silicate based glass. Its high modulus and brittle nature makes it application limited, but it has been used in combination with bone cement to form a bioactive bone cement with metal implants, and it is coated over the implants. This layer facilitates the chemical bonding of implant to the surrounding bone. The product's commercial name is Biogram. Hydroxyapatite obtained from marine coral forms the exoskeleton that is similar to that of hydroxyapatite. Interconnected porous structure resembles the porosity of human cancellous bone. You can see the comparison over here, coralline hydroxyapatite and cancellous bone. Marketed as Pro-osteon, available in various size and blocks. It could be this block or this small granules. It has a very slow resorption. Only a thin layer of hydroxyapatite is nowadays used in the form of Pro-osteon 500R. This is having a faster resorption. The G bone is one of the examples of Indian available hydroxyapatite, slow resorpting. The tricalcium phosphate wet compressive strength slightly less than cancellous bone. Available as block, wedges, and granules. Numerous Chronos is the commonly used, which you might have heard in your institutes also. Now coming on to cell-based bone graft substitutes with current techniques in vitro differentiation of mesenchymal cells, stem cells are cultured. Additives such as dexamethasone, ascorbic acid, and glycerophosphates are used to differentiate towards the osteoblastic lineage. That means you have a cell which is mesenchyme, which goes into forming the non-differentiable osteoprogenitor cell, and from there to differentiated progenitor cell to the osteoblast. So to enhance these steps to becoming an osteoblast, you add additives like dexamethasone, ascorbic acid, and glycerophosphate. The addition of TGF, beta, and BMP2, 4, and 7 to the culture influence the stem cell towards the osteogenic lineage. In research laboratories, marrow cells containing mesenchymal cells have been combined with porous ceramics, and they have been implanted in rat and canines with bone growth occurring as quickly as 2 months. Mesenchymal stem cells have also been seeded onto bioactive ceramics and bioglass also. Now, factor-based bone graft substitutes, which are commonly asked as a question, the factors and proteins that exist in bone are responsible for growth, bone cellular activity. Growth factors bind to receptors, stimulating intracellular environment. This activity translates to protein kinase that induces a series of events of transcripting of messenger mRNA and ultimately into formation of protein used intracellularly and extracellularly. So I am basically giving you these points where BMP, if it is a short note, you have to write how it helps or how it acts. So this is a protein which helps in transcription of messenger RNA into formation of protein used intracellularly, extracellularly, combined with many factors resulting in production and resorption of bone. These factors residing in extracellular matrix of bone like TGF, insulin like growth factor 1 and 2 and all, these are isolated in some cases and synthesized. So this is how BMP acts. All BMP should be used with nails in an unreamed manner, and after soft tissue management, there is 44% reduction in risk of non-union and delayed union with BMP2. It has faster fracture healing, fewer invasive interventions, hardware failure and infection. So this is apart from pathology that we have, biomechanical pathological part, you have to write about how BMP2 helps. It decreases the reduction of non-union by 44%, has faster fracture healing, significantly fewer interventions, hardware failure and infection with this. Now, this we have already discussed. Here are few examples where bone graft is providing a mechanical support. Then it replaces the cortical and segmental bone over here. Then stimulates healing. Newer material and approaches. Despite the many advances, new material and approaches to bone healing continue to be investigated. A microsphere-based design, Lorenzin, have created a porous biomimetic matrix that provides an osteoconductive surface for osteoblastic attachment and interconnected pore system to allow cellular proliferation. The basic design has been combined with ceramic. The strategy behind this is to allow benefit of both material as well as that of the cells. A similar polymer ceramic composite has been shown to be viable surface attachment for production of murine stromal cell transfected to produce BMP7. Now coming on to one more short note which is asked in bone graft, that is exchange nailing. IM nail fixation, a purely mechanical treatment method, is distinguished from exchange nailing in that in the latter it is a method that is both mechanical as well as biological. By definition, exchange nailing requires the removal of previously placed IM nail with a nail already spanning the non-union site. The problem of sealed medullary canal is not an issue over here. Additionally, the medullary canal is already known to accept the passage of a IM nail unless the nail has been broken. Such a case may require extensive bony and soft tissue dissection at the non-union site. So other treatment methods should be considered if there is a broken nail. When the previously placed nail has been removed, the medullary canal is reamed progressively by 0.5 mm increment. As general rule, try to use an exchange nail of 2 to 4 mm diameter minimum than the previous nail and over ream 1 mm larger than the nail that you want to put. Reaming therefore proceeds to a reamer tip size of 3 to 5 mm after removing the nail. Following removing the reaming, a large nail is inserted. Then closed nailing likely also lessens the risk of infection, provides good bony contact at the non-union site. Statically lock exchange nail, although many authors do not do static locking, but they do a dynamic locking. In most instances, partial excision of fibula is not done along with exchange nailing in tibia, but it decreases the stability of the construct. But I preferably do it. Closed intramedullary autogenous cancellous bone graft. It can be used to treat diaphyseal bony defect. Autogenous cancellous bone harvested from the iliac crest is delivered to the defect by use of positioning tube. That is, once you've put the guide wire, and before that you use a exchange tube. With that tube, up to the fracture side, you put these type of iliac crest harvested bones. So this is one chart. Vascularized autogenous cortical bone. Fibula is the potential harvest site. Advantage, it provides immediate structural integrity, and it is disadvantages is technically demanding. Other one is iliac crest. It is one stage procedure. It was these two are used mainly for AVN of hip. Ribs, potential for graft hypertrophy, prolonged non-weight bearing is needed because not structurally strong, but it has the ability to span massive segmental defects. So it is mainly used in vertebra. The disadvantage is donor site morbidity, that is pain, neurovascular injury, fixation problem, and defect is periarticular. It is contraindicated for children. Non-vascularized fibula can be used to reconstruct large defects, but you need prolonged non-weight bearing, prolonged support required in upper extremity. Similarly, you get cortical autogenous graft from tibia and iliac crest that we have already discussed. Basically, this is a short summary of what all we have discussed up till now. So bulk cortical allografts, then stirred allografts or intramedullary cortical allografts, this all has been discussed. This would be shared with you. I think so I finished in time.